All right, Kevin, back with you today for another episode of Million Dollar Relationships. And today I'm here with my friend, Mike Dillard. Mike, welcome, man. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, you too. It's been a while. It's been a while. And I know before we hit record, I got to share a cool experience with you that happened a few years. Gosh, time flies. That's been a while too. I'm trying to think when that was. I think it was like 2015 or 16, maybe, that you had invited me.
It would have been around 2012,
Oh,
2013.
Jiminy.
Yeah.
Wow, time really does fly.
Yeah.
So 10 years ago, Jiminy Christmas. Oh man. And I am just like so grateful for that experience, Mike. And I know I shared that with you, and I won't go into detail here, but that makes doing this interview even more special for me. And it's really cool to be interviewing people like yourself, people that I've known for a long time. And, I'm trying to remember how you and I met. I think it was through Robert, was how you and I met. And then, of course, we met in Genius Network too. And, and of course, with this podcast, the whole thing is just to really, I want to be able to give you an opportunity to share your story and your experience around this. And because I know it's just going to inspire other entrepreneurs to place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, and rewarding relationships in their life. And of course, as entrepreneurs, that's the most valuable asset we have. And
Sure.
So what I'd like to do is just kind of start by giving you the opportunity to share a little bit about what you're working on, what you do, who you serve, what motivates you to do what you do, and just kind of give everybody an idea of like, who is Mike Dillard?
Well, that's changed a lot. That's changed a lot and multiple times in the last few years. Long story short, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 25, self-employed since then. I've built 3 multiple 8-figure businesses since then in 3 different industries. And, typical story up until 2018. And around June 13th, 2018 is when the old the old version of me ceased to exist within a moment. And I was just sitting around the room one day and wasn't feeling really well, and just felt the click in the back of my head back here. And it just was like, that's kind of weird. I don't think you're supposed to feel things in your skull like that, but I did. And wasn't painful, so didn't think anything of it until that night when I physically couldn't fall asleep. And then the next day and then the next night couldn't fall asleep, next day, next night. So for about 6 to 7 days, I didn't get a single minute of sleep, and my body started to shut down, and I started to physically die at that point because you can't go that long without sleep. And it was extremely scary because nobody could figure out what was going on or why. And what's really scary is when you jump on YouTube or Google and you type in your symptoms and you can't find a single other person in the world on those platforms who you can relate to, who has a similar experience. And so, long story short, that led to over a year of me living on my couch for 12 hours a day, moving to the bed for 12 hours a day, had to abandon my business, had to abandon any kind of social life. I basically was bedridden for 20 plus hours a day and couldn't sleep, just had incredible insomnia. My doctor gave me Valium and whatever the sleep prescription is that a lot of people get on, Ambien. And even a double dose of those, like a 2x dose of those, would get me maybe 60 minutes of sleep a night, and then I'd be up again. And unfortunately, then those medications started to make me suicidal. And the business just declined, the bank accounts declined. And that went on for about a year because nobody could tell me what happened. And then thankfully, my buddy, JP Newman, I had lunch with him and just kind of broke down in tears that day out of just frustration and fear and didn't know what else to do. And he said something that changed my life. And he said, "Have you ever been tested for toxic mold?" And I said, "No, I have not." And he's like, "You should go get tested. Go visit Dr. Ann Shippey." because he had gone through a severe toxic mold exposure about 3 years prior. And so I did, and that was what had happened. The building that I was living in downtown Austin was brand new, but about 6 months before the little click happened, the entire building had flooded from top to bottom through the elevator shafts during this massive week of rain we had in Austin. And apparently mold had started to grow in the AC system and all, throughout the building. And anything above 5 on a mycotoxin scale is in the red, if you will. It's toxic. You need to get it out of your body. And a mycotoxin is a neurotoxin. It basically starts to eat away the myelin in your brain and in your nervous system. So anything above 5 is toxic. My result was 21,000. It was literally the highest level they'd ever seen in the lab, and they thought it was a mistake, but it wasn't. And so that was, just over a year of going through that process before we found out, what had caused it. So I immediately had to move. And that led to a 4-year process of healing from that because of the damage that was done to the brain and the nervous system. And it's been a long process, but it's been a really life-changing process because it forced me to pursue all different kinds of therapies, different plant medicines, psychedelics, hypnotherapy, anything that would help repair the nervous system and repair the brain and repair the body's, sense of safety. Because what can happen when you get in a situation like that is my body knew that it was under attack and in a lethal environment, but my brain didn't know that. I didn't know that consciously. And so all night and day, my body's sending out cortisol, like, hey, get us out of here. We need to run from this tiger, right? But it was invisible. It was an invisible tiger. And so I just sat there in that environment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for a year. And that heightened cortisol response causes something called the limbic loop, where your limbic brain gets just hyper activated. And if you could imagine being in maybe World War II in a bomb shelter where you're getting sheltered, bombed constantly and shelled constantly, that was how my body was 24 hours a day for over a year. And with that amount of exposure, that just does a lot of damage to the nervous system that gets embedded really, really deep. And so again, it's been a 3 to 4 year process of unwinding that I'm still going through. But going through MDMA therapy, psilocybin, 9-ketamine IVs, and all of these different therapies that I was using just to get better ended up being a huge blessing in disguise, because it allowed me to heal all of the past shit or baggage that I've had, accumulate in life, as we all do, whether that's from being bullied growing up or going through a divorce or a business blow up or, any of those things. It really allowed me to heal those, which was a huge blessing. And so that's kind of what I've gone through and been up to for the last 4 years. And now I'm really in the last 12 months just coming out of that, where I'm healthy enough at this point where I can start working again. And Michelle and I have spent the last year teaching people, where we basically took what I learned from a psychology perspective around how your neurochemistry works from a hormone perspective, and then how your subconscious works from an internal beliefs or limiting decisions perspective. And while I had to master those during my healing process, I realized that what I learned could be applied to many different areas in life. And specifically, we decided to apply it to money and people's relationships subconsciously to money. Entrepreneurs specifically all share a very, very similar personality profile, meaning that we are wired for risk. We feel completely fine and safe taking extreme risks where other people don't. And ultimately what that can turn into is an addiction to adrenaline. We're very comfortable in a high cortisol, high stress, high adrenaline environment. And in fact, we thrive in it. And that's fine and dandy, but that can also cause challenges with money. My experience is that I observe entrepreneurs where they tend to go into a make it, and then we spend it, and then we risk it cycle. And then we have to start over again. So we make it, we spend it, and we risk it. We make it, we spend it, and we risk it. And it just keeps going through this circle. And the reason that that's happening is because it's an addiction to cortisol and adrenaline. So as soon as the business gets easy and it gets boring, we find a way to blow it up, or we find another idea to go pursue that will give us that adrenaline rush of excitement of creating or building or making money. And then from a financial side, the same thing comes into play. If you make a lot of money, which a lot of our colleagues tend to do, that's exciting, it's fun, and it involves a lot of adrenaline. But as soon as that money's in the bank account and it's made, we tend to find something to go put it into, whether it's Bitcoin or another business idea or another startup or whatever it may be, that gives us that same adrenaline rush. And these are all neurochemical patterns that most people are unaware of. They're its own version of an addiction. And then we have a subconscious program that's usually running that's pushing that relationship with money in what I call an inverted dopamine response, meaning there are some people who feel safety and security when they save and keep their money, right? And there are other people, again, typically entrepreneurs, who feel uncomfortable by having and holding their money. I guess a better explanation of that would be, and I'm getting over COVID, by the way. I've had COVID for the last 5 days, so I'm a little foggy at the moment. So I apologize for that. But so what an inverted dopamine response means is that a normal person, let's just say, like, you look at a Warren Buffett who makes tons and tons and tons of money. He gets pleasure from making money and keeping his money and saving his money. That's why he's lived in the same house he's lived in for 30 or 40 years. He drives a normal car. Spending money for Warren Buffett actually stresses him out. It causes stress and it causes anxiety, while making it and saving it gives him pleasure. That would be what I call as a normal dopamine response. Other individuals basically get pleasure from spending money. That would be the majority of America, right? Whenever you feel stress or anxiety, the vast majority of people have been trained to spend money, whether it's on ice cream or alcohol or wine or food or a purse or a computer or a car or whatever it may be. That's how we get our dopamine, and that's how we extinguish that feeling of stress and anxiety, and we go back to normal. And then if you look at what happens in our world today from a marketing perspective, take television or social media, it's all about scare you, negative headlines, the world's going to end, war, pandemic, blah, 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 blah. Anxiety followed up by commercials for here's a beer, here's a pill, here's a purse, here's a car, here's a whatever. And so that pattern of spending money in order to extinguish stress and anxiety then becomes cemented into your neurology, and it becomes a subconscious program at that point. And if you have a subconscious program that says you have to spend money in order to feel good in a world that's full of fear and anxiety, you're basically put in a position where it is now impossible for you to build wealth and financial security over the long run in your life. And so this is what Michelle and I have been teaching people how to become aware of, and then retrain themselves out of and overcome. And then how do you build up a normalized dopamine response so that saving and building wealth over time becomes effortless instead of an effort filled venture, like having to have discipline to save money, right? If you have to have discipline and put effort into something, it's always going to typically fail, which is the same reason why workouts are in that same kind of category. It requires willpower. If it requires willpower for you to save money, you're going to fail in that process. So we help people transform, at a fundamental core level to where that willpower is no longer required, and that saving and investing money for you is what gives you pleasure. And when it gives you pleasure, then it happens automatically, and then you can't help but become wealthy at that point. So that's what we've been up to.
Wow. That is okay. So I'm sure at this point, a lot of people are like listening to this going, okay, I want to know more about that. And I usually wait until kind of the end to say, hey, how can people, if anybody's connected, how can they find out more information? But I'm not going to wait. I'm just going to say, how can they find out more information, Mike?
Yeah, we teach people this at richereveryday.com.
Richereveryday.com. Okay.
Yeah, and it's just I'd say a quite reasonably priced course, and it's 3 phases. We take people through the first phase is all about the neurology and the neurochemistry, and teaching people how to become aware of their neurochemical patterns and their subconscious programs. In phase two, we give them a system to help retrain those programs and to start building wealth on a daily basis, which is why it's called Richer Every Day. And then in phase three, we teach people how to set up asset protection strategies with trust. We teach them how to earn passive investment income with real estate and crypto and different types of passive income strategies. And the goal is to literally make yourself richer every single day. And this is just something we've systematized, and we've made it really easy for folks. And it's been life-changing for us. My relationship with money is completely different now than it was a few years ago. And when I say relationship with money, again, I mean from a neurochemical perspective and also an emotional perspective. And everybody thinks that, building wealth is about making money. It's not the case. I've made over $60 million in my career as an entrepreneur, and I've lost all of it multiple times, and I've remade it back multiple times. And that's that make it, spend it, risk it cycle. And so making money is okay, but it's not what's going to make you rich. It's having these internal patterns in a healthy place that allows you to build wealth over the long run. And if you don't have those, this is why lottery winners and sports professional athletes go broke, right? They won the money. They have the $100 million, the $50 million. And yet the vast majority of them go broke within a few years afterwards, because they're those two components that are ultimately driving all of their actions and decisions were not aligned with keeping that money. And so ultimately they really, they had lost the war before it had even begun.
Yeah. Wow. Mike, I really appreciate you sharing all that. And heck, I'm going to go check it out myself too. And so, okay. So what I want to do now is I want to switch gears a little bit.
Yep.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners and stuff. And so, have you ever been introduced to a person that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not even be possible if not for this person? And I know, Mike, especially with an entrepreneur like you, I know there's lots of people you could probably talk about. But I'm going to challenge you to just, to narrow it down as much as we can. You might want to talk about a few people, but narrow it down as much as we can. And let's honor somebody who has had such a profound impact on your life and on your business.
I can't pick just one, Kevin.
Okay. All right.
Can I do more than one?
Mike, you do whatever you feel is right. I gave you guidance, but you got to go with what you feel is right, man. Okay. All right.
Because there's different people who showed up at different times that were all equally impactful and important. The first I would say were my mentors when I was in network marketing back in my, early 20s, 20, 21, 22 years old, and just a young kid trying to figure out what to do. I think my video froze. Did it freeze on you?
It did freeze.
There we go. Okay. So that would be Mark Weiser and Todd Falcone. And again, this is me straight out of college working at PF Chang's and trying to build a business over the course of years. And those two guys were pivotal because they were professionals, extremely successful at what they did, but they really took the time to coach me and mentor me and made a huge difference in my life at that point in my career. And so I would say that was the first two people that really made a big difference. After that, meeting Yannick Silver and building a relationship with him, who's obviously a mutual friend, was a really big deal. That's who helped to bring me into the internet marketing world and, opened the doors to me meeting all of the old school OGs like John Reese and Jeff Walker and, all those guys that I became friends with. More recently, obviously, JP Newman and Ann Shippey literally saved my life, from that mold situation. Wouldn't be here without either of them. Aubrey Marcus, I'm gonna throw in there as well. Aubrey played a really pivotal role in my healing process over the last few years and what I've learned from him and the experiences that I've had with him. Played a really pivotal role. And then I would say most recently over the last 3 years would be my wife, Michelle, who met me when I was arguably at my lowest point in life and could barely walk up a flight of stairs and just had all kinds of challenges, and she was really there to support me and just be there for me, and to be a partner at a time in life. We met 2 months before COVID, 2 or 3 months before COVID hit. I take that wrong. We met in September, and then COVID hit in March. And so we met and then moved in and rented a house together, put our kids together, and homeschooled together. And so we went from, a couple month long relationship into that environment. And it was, despite the challenges from the world, we had an incredible, year together going through that process. And so she's been there in every way possible, and my best friend in every way that you can think of. So those are the names that pop up that have really, really, really made pivotal. You hit a bifurcation point, right? Your life's going to go left or right. All of those people had an impact on which way that I went, and a very positive one at that. So
if you think back on these relationships and those pivotal events, what are one or two things that really stand out? Because this spans a long time. What are one or two things, experiences that happened as a result of these relationships that would have never even happened if those relationships hadn't been in place?
I don't know if never would have happened is possible, because I believe that if you're on a path, you're going to end up at your destination no matter what happens. And I'll take Mark and Todd as an example of that. They really helped me find my confidence. They taught me how to sell for the first time after years and years of struggling and not having the ability to sell. With or without them, I was going to acquire or figure that skill out. But they were the ones who again invested the time and gave me a shot and took me under their wing and taught me those skill sets. And so they were certainly pivotal in that. Yannick invited me into his mastermind when he first started that up, the very first year that he held that. And I think that was just a big graduation point for me, going from kind of the student on the outside looking into the inner circle, if you will, of leadership within that industry. Going and spending a week with him and Richard Branson on Necker Island was a pivotal moment for sure. And then, with Aubrey, he was really the one that introduced me to a lot of these alternative therapies from a psychedelic standpoint, and him having over a decade of experience in that, the amount of trust that I had in him in order to feel safe pursuing those therapies was critical, and again, ultimately a life-saving decision and experience for me. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what comes to mind.
Mike, that was perfect, man. That was perfect. And because my goal with this podcast has always been twofold. One, to give people like yourself the opportunity to share your experience and then honor people who have had such a profound impact on your life. And then for the listeners, to just inspire and motivate them to place an intentional focus of creating more meaningful relationships in their life. And I mean, we've definitely achieved that here today. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. And
anytime, Kevin. Yeah.
And you and I have not spoke for a few years since before. So I had not. I mean, I've seen you post stuff here and there, and I'm on your email list. But to hear it firsthand is way different. And I'm just so glad that you're doing so much better health-wise and stuff.
And, thank you, brother.
And so, any last words before we call it a wrap?
No, thanks for doing this, and appreciate your friendship, my friend. So yeah, I'm honored to be on the show, and I think this is a great message that you're putting out there, because you are right. Relationships are the biggest, difference maker in the world for sure. So
yeah. Awesome. Well, Mike, thanks again, and really appreciate it, man.
You're welcome. All right. Take care, everybody.